Hello, and welcome to the No Wrong Notes podcast, a show hosted by me, Veronica Kokis, holistic voice teacher and singer just like you. Grab a cup of tea, relax, and sit back as we discuss all things singing technique, mindset tips, and more so you can show up as the most confident and creative singer you can be. Hi, y'all, and welcome to another episode of No Wrong Notes. This week's episode is an awesome conversation I had with Renee Maranan, who is a vocal instructor, voice teacher trainer, public speaker, writer, and certified life coach. She really does it all. In this conversation, we discuss how singers can tap into their authenticity in their singing and in their daily lives, as well as how important it is to have creative outlets such as singing and songwriting during these crazy, turbulent times. A little bit about Renee before diving into the episode. She has over 20 years of experience as a vocal instructor, teaching recording artists, Broadway performers, voice teachers, and singers of all levels across the United States and internationally. Renee serves the Institute for Vocal Advancement as one of its most sought-after mentor teachers and ambassadors, having taught and mentored voice teachers from all over the world through the IVA certification program. She is accredited through the International Coaching Federation as an associate certified coach, and she uses her coaching skills to help singers and voice teachers achieve their goals, whether it be in art, business, or life. When she's not teaching or coaching, she writes monthly articles for Worship Musician magazine and teaches at conferences and vocal intensives for her local community. All right, so let's dive into this conversation with Renee Maranan. All right, I am here with Renee Maranan, and thank you so much for coming on the No Wrong Notes podcast today.
Yes, I'm so happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yay! So let's get started. I'd love it if you could introduce yourself to the audience, explaining what you do and how you got to where you are in your career as a voice teacher and a life coach, which I think is super cool.
Yeah, so hello, my name is Renee. I am, as Veronica said, a voice coach and also a certified life coach. And how I got here, it was kind of an organic journey, I think. You know, how I got into teaching was very natural. I've always been a singer, and friends and family and, church friends and youth group friends would obviously see and hear that I can sing, and they would approach me asking to teach them to sing, and that was kind of how I got introduced into this career, which of course in the beginning was not a career. It was just something that I was doing as a sort of side hustle. But the more I grew into the profession of teaching voice, the more I came to really love it for what it was. And now it's my full-time career. This is what I do for a living. And I am a certified life coach. That came later. That came several years after I had fully established myself as a voice teacher. And it emerged actually rather slowly, just because friends and family and students would tell me, I love talking to you about my life, and I love, getting your advice on things, getting your guidance on things, and mentorship on things. And it just kind of slowly became clear to me that this was apparently a gift or maybe an inclination that I had. And it just kind of came naturally whenever I would work with people, especially in my work as a vocal instructor. And I just kind of felt that I needed to give myself the tools, the right trainings, so that I could make sure that I was serving people to the best of my ability, that I was, you know, um, maintaining a high standard of excellence, and also making sure that I was observing, you know, I think a healthy set of boundaries as far as the scope of my practice, which I think is very, very important. And that's one of the most valuable things that I've learned in my certification and in my training. Um, and so here I am, and I find myself in a very special intersection between the two, where I get to use my skills as a life coach to help support my vocal students. And then I do also have some clients who just come to me for life coaching. I coach a lot of vocal instructors, but I've also coached a number of other different kinds of professionals as well. And I find that work equally rewarding. And so that's me.
That is awesome. And I think that that is so, it's a really, really cool journey, especially because as you were saying, and I think I see this too in my own teaching, when it comes to singing and when it comes to singing, period, it's more than just the physical, right? There's also the mental and emotional piece. And while technique is important, I think that having those skills, like those life coaching skills, giving students these skills, working with them on it is so important. And you talk a lot about healing in your work, and I'm curious from like a personal level, in what ways has singing been healing for you? And in what ways do you think singers can use singing as a tool for healing in their own lives?
Oh, I love that question so much. It's been it's been a very healing tool for me in so many different situations. Of course, I've been a singer my whole life, and so singing has been interwoven into my history from as far back as I can remember. And there have been a lot of little moments throughout my life where healing provided comfort, where healing provided me with a sense of hopefulness. It allowed me to move on. Of course, there are a few salient moments in my story. When loved ones have passed away, that's I think one huge thing. I've had a couple of very close family members pass away. Actually, I had one family member pass away not very long ago, just a couple weeks ago, just a month ago, and her funeral was a couple of weeks ago, and I had the opportunity to sing for her funeral. And it's moments like that where I get to express myself through song, but also help to support the healing and help to walk with others in their grief. There is a very special gift in that, being of service to others even in your own sorrow, because I think when you can be in a place of service, it there's something very empowering about that, and there's something that is very healing in that is very unique, I think. And so, moments like when my grandmother passed away, I wrote a song about her and sang at her funeral. Breakups, I had, I had several, well, not too many breakups, but I remember this one particular breakup. I was, in my college years, and it was a bad one. And and I wrote a song about it, put it up on YouTube. It's a little embarrassing now.
No,
But
that reminds me of like when I had Tumblr back in the day and I had a secret Tumblr where I would like write stuff like that. So that takes me back.
absolutely, I feel like every singer songwriter has had that kind of experience, where they had a bad breakup and they had to write a song about it. We all have a little Taylor Swift in us, and yeah, it was incredibly cathartic. And then of course even moments of anger, moments of feeling a sense of injustice. I remember a couple of very salient moments in the last 10 years when things have happened culturally. They're really kind of like it really caused a lot of like a great sense of injustice and a great sense of anger and rage at the system, and just things that were happening in the world. And music was a huge part of how I processed those experiences. And so yeah, it's absolutely been a huge part of that for me. And I think, and I see it in a lot of people. I see it in the students that I work with. Some of the students who take voice lessons with me, we also work on songwriting. And so the journey can be so profound, and everything can just flow, and you can just kind of see this person go on this straight upward trajectory from being broken to being healed. And then there are times when it's like really bumpy, and you really have to walk with them in this journey of adversity, and sort of like having to overcome these things they're confronting within themselves, and it can be very, very challenging. But in so many cases, I've seen people really rise to the challenge, and the reward is incredibly, it's an honor, it's a gift to be a part of. Um, so yeah, I think music is such a big part of the healing journey for all of us if we allow it to be, and if we have the tools, I think, and the support to make it so.
Yes, and I was going to ask you about that songwriting piece because I have a couple of students that I work, sometimes we'll work on songwriting in lessons. And my question for you is, do you have any students or have you worked with any students who maybe don't have like music theory experience or background? They don't know too much about like chords, melody, that sort of thing. What like have you ever had a student that's come in that's wanted to work on songwriting, that's wanted to do that, but maybe doesn't have that background and wants to express themselves in this way? And how have you helped students like that? And what did you guys do to write these songs or that sort of thing?
For sure, absolutely. And I should preface this by saying that I'm not somebody who has like an I don't have training in like music education. And so, whatever I use when I teach students is just based on my own experience as a songwriter and as a teacher of, voice students and singers and other songwriters. So I'm certainly not claiming any kind of special expertise in this whatsoever, but I have had students who came to me who just really wanted to be able to write their own songs. And one of the best ways that I found to help them with that was to write it with them. And just kind of, everybody kind of comes with a different starting point. So sometimes a singer or a student will come in and they'll have the beginnings of a melody, or they'll have written some poetry, that they want to put to some music. And so I'll kind of take whatever starting point they give me, and then, with their permission, I'll kind of play around with it and see, okay, let's see what we can do with this. Oh, you've got a verse here. What does this feel like for you? What kind of a groove do you want? And then kind of bringing that out of them. And then I'll maybe pull out a guitar, or I'll start plunking around on the piano. And then I'll just kind of like improvise and throw out a melody, and then ask them, well, what do you think? What did you think about that? And then that kind of helps to, I kind of act like training wheels for them, so that they can ease their way into the process, but not feel like they have to be the only ones coming up with all of the ideas, which I think can be really daunting for somebody who's never done it before. And then as we go along, I kind of explain different elements of, you know, song structure, different music theory concepts, and kind of talk about chord progressions and different ideas and terms and concepts that might be helpful for them in that moment, so that they can understand why things work. Why does this melody line sound better than this in the context of the verse that we are writing? Why do we need a little gap in between the verse and the chorus when we can just mush them together? Why do we need to keep the time signature the same all the way throughout? Or why does it help to change it up? So as we are kind of going through the practice of songwriting, I'm unpacking some of these concepts in practice, so that the theory and the practice of it is all woven together. And all the while making sure that they know, this isn't my song. I'm just helping you to chip away at it so you can figure out what's inside your own head. Because most of the time people have the song in their head. They just don't know how to bring it out, because maybe they don't have the language, they don't have the structure to do that. And that's where I come in. So it takes a little bit of guesswork, but that's worked really, really well for a lot of people. And we've been able to create some magical moments, through those processes. And as we go through that, they learn, oh, this is how this works. And then eventually they kind of learn how to do it for themselves little by little. And that's really rewarding when they can get to that point. And then pretty soon they're sending me voice memos. Hey, I've got a song idea. And then they've got lyrics with melody. Okay, cool. Now let's talk about, maybe you can put some chords on this, right? So that's a really fun process, and it's very tailor fit to each person. And I think it's really important to kind of meet people where they're at and
Yes.
imbue like a sense of play into the whole thing, you know?
Yes. And like, I wanted to dive into this a little bit because I think, as you were saying before, songwriting can be really cathartic and can help us kind of process some of what we're feeling. And it can be this great creative outlet, but I think so often people get turned off because they think it's this kind of really hard thing. And I mean, there are different elements that go into writing a song, but that's where having like a teacher to help guide you, or something that even some of my own students have done, is that they've found little royalty free tracks on YouTube just to like play around and get started. It's like it really doesn't have to be this complicated thing. So I love that. Moving on to a different topic here. I feel like each singer has a recurring struggle or through line when it comes to their singing. So, kind of going back more to the healing the aspect of things. For myself, it's perfectionism and constantly working through that and revisiting that and nurturing that perfectionist part with compassion. I'm curious as to whether there is a recurring struggle that you've experienced in your own singing. How has that struggle shown up for you, and how do you manage or deal with it?
Oh my goodness, yes. For me, it's definitely imposter syndrome. Like it's imposter syndrome all day long, all my life. Like that's always the case. And for whatever reason, no matter what people tell me, I've always had this story in my head that I'm just not good enough for the things that I want to do in my life, which is crazy to me and to everybody who I tell, because it's like I know myself to be very competent. I know that I have a gift for singing and I know that I've worked very hard at cultivating that gift. But yeah, it's been this story that's been programmed in me. And so one of the ways that I've dealt with it is just doing it. Um, just doing it. But that's hard to do. So I say yes to opportunities. And so when people give me opportunities to do things, if it sounds interesting to me, I'll just say yes. And then the imposter syndrome will kick in, but I'll have already made the commitment to do it. And so there is already this sort of like, there's this impetus to keep going, right? I'm not in a position to allow that voice to stop me from going where I need to go because I've already committed. I've committed to the role, or I've committed to the show, or I've committed to teach this webinar, or I've gone out there and promoted myself as a voice teacher. And so I can't go back. Now I've got to do it. So I think that that's one of the things that has really helped me with it. And the more I've become experienced in certain things, I wouldn't say that the imposter syndrome goes away, but I think the more proof I have that the imposter syndrome it's just something, it's just a voice that's there and it's trying to keep me safe from something. But it's not really serving me in this current moment. And I can embrace it and know that it's trying to help me. It's, it's it might not be helping me in the best way right now, but it's trying to it's trying to keep me safe, right? So I don't need to judge it and I don't need to shut it down, because it's a part of me. But I also don't let it, I don't need to let it make the decisions for me. So that's
Yes,
I think one way.
that is really good. And I like too how your method and kind of what has worked for you of navigating that is very action oriented. Because I think a lot of times, I mean, for me, I guess with I have a lot of Aquarius in my astrology and my birth chart. And so I'm very like intellectual, like about things, and I'll intellectualize it. And so I kind of need like mental strategies a lot of times with these things. But I love how what you were just saying, it's again very action oriented, meaning like, look, when you're doing this kind of work on yourself, when you're trying to work past these roadblocks, it doesn't just have to be like mindset work, mindset work, mindset work. Sometimes it's just doing the thing and actually like following through with it. So I really love that you brought that up. Uh, Pivoting to some other things that I see from singers, in lessons with students sometimes, they struggle to show up authentically in their singing, as in their inner critic keeps them from expressing themselves fully, kind of pivoting off of what we were just talking about. What are tools that singers can use to work through limiting beliefs and express themselves more fully on stage and in the audition room? Maybe it's some of this action oriented stuff that you were just mentioning. Maybe it's mindset work. What do you usually recommend? I mean, every student is different, every person is different, but I guess what are some things that you commonly recommend for that?
Yeah, gosh, there's so many different ways. And I think you're right. This definitely connects to what we were just talking about, the question that you asked me right before. And I think in both cases, it's important to recognize the value of working with somebody who can support you in your healing journey. So somebody like a counselor or a therapist. And if you find that these, or even a life coach, if you find that these limiting beliefs are coming up and really getting in your way, it could be worth looking into some of those avenues to see if you can get somebody to give you some tools, right, to help you navigate. Because I know for myself, there's only so much that I could do on my own. And when I really um, leaned into therapy and just making sure that I had the necessary tools to help myself heal, um, it it allowed the side of me that had been too afraid to come out to really emerge, and I was able to show up a lot more authentically. But I think some of the tools for, tackling some of those limiting beliefs is one of the ones that I love is finding proof. What's the evidence, right? So if you find yourself hearing this negative self-talk, oh, you're just not that good at that. Oh, you could never do that. It's a very, very small question, but you just ask yourself, where's the proof? What's the proof? And so often when I coach people and I ask them this question, the answer that I get is, I don't know. I guess there's not really any proof, you know? And then it's a question of, okay, well, if there isn't any proof, then, how can you be so sure, right? And I think another question is, maybe it's not even important to debunk the limiting belief. Okay, so there's a limiting belief there. There's a belief that you're going to fail. There's a belief that you're going to get rejected. One other question that I've loved that I learned from my coach training is so what? Okay, so you believe you're going to fail. You believe you're not good enough. Okay, so what? What would happen if you just went and did it anyways, right? Well, I don't know. Maybe I'll fail. Maybe I'll get rejected. Maybe people laugh at me, and you kind of go through the laundry list of the things that you're afraid of. And more often than not, people realize that the things that they're afraid of are actually not that scary after all. So you believe that this thing is like larger than life, but once you actually talk it out, well, I mean, it's not that big of a deal, actually, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Or it's often like, I really love that. Where's the proof? Because it goes back to how some of what we believe about ourselves, it really is like, I mean, it's not made up in our mind. Like our brain responds to things based on our past experiences and whatnot. But like, again, where is the physical proof? Like sometimes it really is like our thought patterns, and we can always change that. Especially with the help of like a therapist or a counselor, which I really love that you brought up. And I do think that having some of these tools to express ourselves authentically and courageously is especially important right now, not just in singing and performing, but also in advocating for ourselves as singers and individuals, whether that be for better pay, working conditions, or equitable, inclusive treatment. What is your biggest hot take when it comes to the music industry right now? And this is a bigger, this is like a really big question, like pie in the sky question, but how do you think we can get the changes that we want to see in the industry? No, that's like
Yeah,
really
that
like
is
big.
that is a huge question. And I do think also that it ties into the question that you asked earlier about authenticity and being authentic to who you are. There's power in being able to witness to yourself when yourself is telling you, I'm not comfortable with this. I'm afraid of this. I don't like this. This hurts. This makes me scared. There is such power in just being able to receive that and say, okay, that's how we feel right now. This is where we are. Right. And I think even when it comes to limiting beliefs, there's such a drive in so many people to eradicate limiting beliefs, right? To fix those problems, right? To fix the things that hold us back. And there's good reason for that, right? And even as I'm giving you tools like, okay, where's the proof of this? It sounds like the goal is to debunk it, but and to do away with it. But the fact is, like you said, those voices are a part of who we are, right? And if we're always in the habit of shutting them down and saying, nope, I reject that. That's not helpful for me. Then I believe, in my opinion, we're developing this habit of being inauthentic to other people, but also being inauthentic to ourselves. And now if that compromises our ability to advocate for what we need when we are compromising our ability to even witness to ourselves in moments of suffering and injustice, right? If we can't even give ourselves the words and the time and the space and the freedom and permission to acknowledge when we are uncomfortable with something, it doesn't matter what it is, right? If we can't give ourselves permission to acknowledge that and articulate it, even in our own minds, then how are we empowering ourselves to articulate it to the world, right? And so I feel like it begins with that. I feel like it begins with just giving ourselves a break and just saying all feelings are okay. Like you're allowed to think limiting beliefs. There is nothing wrong with you if you're feeling imposter syndrome. You are not broken if you're a perfectionist. And also, you are not difficult when you're telling your voice teacher that you're uncomfortable with them putting their hand on you. And you are not being a bad team player if you are telling your producer that this thing that they're trying to get you to do in the booth is hurting your voice. And you are not being a bad actor or performer if you are telling your director that I need to call in sick because I have the flu. Like it all begins with that seed of authenticity, I think, in my opinion,
Oh
right?
man, this is just so good. Because I really do think a lot of these things start with ourselves and like I mean, I'm not saying it's all on the individual to like fix these
No.
issues or anything like that, but what you just said about advocating for ourselves in these settings, these musical settings, whether it's for a gig or an audition or in a production, uh, it's hard to advocate for yourself and speak up if you are doubting yourself. And it's like there's reasons why we do that, but it's like, again, going back to that sort of questioning. And I love too what you were saying about with all of this, whether it's perfectionism or imposter syndrome, it's not to necessarily eradicate these parts because these parts, as you said earlier, how these things have helped you get to where you are, right? So it's like even though they have, even though they can rear their ugly head and kind of like really claws can come out with them,
Mm-hmm.
at the same time, like it's a part of us, and I think questioning and also sort of integrating those parts too, like can really be helpful for advocating for ourselves in these ways.
Mm-hmm.
Though I'd love to hear if you have any hot takes. I really love to hear
Oh,
people's hot takes on these things.
so okay. So moving on to hot takes, I read a book, and actually I read a book called "Can Music Make You Sick" by Sally Ann Gross and George Musgrave. And actually, I had the privilege of watching George Musgrave give a presentation about his research on um, well-being, the well-being of aspiring professional musicians, and it was sobering. The book is sobering, and it's actually available for open access. And so I can give you the link afterwards if you
What
want
was
to.
the name of that one again?
The book is called "Can Music Make You Sick?"
Okay,
Measuring the Pace
awesome.
of Musical Ambition. It's on open access. I can give you the link if you want to include it in your description for your episode. Um, and it has so many insights as to some of the things that are impacting the well-being of musicians who are aspiring for a professional career in the industry. And I have so many hot takes that were inspired by this book, but I'm going to just share two. Okay. One is that I think our role as educators, as music educators, as voice teachers, we have a job to do in helping to protect aspiring professional musicians. And maybe one is just preparing them for the realities of the industry. But I think two is helping to affirm them in their self advocacy. And I think that a lot of singers came from education that taught them to disregard the things that they were feeling, the things that they were experiencing. I think a generation before ours, before you and I, right? And maybe before that, I think the prevailing model of instruction was very much based on this master apprentice kind of approach to teaching, where it's like, I'm the master, I know everything, you are the student, and you just have to sit and learn. And I think that really instilled a lot of shut up and listen, you know, in performers. And I think that that's very harmful, because I feel like if people are going to walk into this industry, they need to have been taught that their voice counts. They need to be taught that their opinions matter. They need to be taught that questioning is okay. They need to be taught that teachers can also be wrong, authorities can also be wrong, and that it's okay for them to say, I disagree. And I think that as teachers, that can be difficult. One, because maybe some of us have developed a bit of an ego, right? But I think two, because we have to be on our game. If a student comes to me and says, I don't understand why you're giving me this exercise, the approach that I would love to take is to say, okay, tell me more, and to engage in a discussion about where the disconnect is happening, so that if I'm wrong, I can correct myself. But if there's a misunderstanding, then I can enlighten them. But it's not going to be, what I don't want is to tell them, well, I'm the teacher, you're the student, so you need to just, you just need to cut it out and just trust the process. You can trust the process and still question when you don't understand something. And I think that leaving room for that dissent, I think, is very important, even in the private studio, because it primes them to go out into the world and understand that that is a valuable thing for them to be able to do, not only for themselves, but for the institution at large. It's healthy. It's healthy for us to question each other, right? And so that's one hot take. I feel like that's something that we all need to really reckon with as educators, is, are we forming performers and musicians and creatives who understand the value of their own voice?
Yeah.
And if we are not putting that at the forefront of our teaching practice, then how can we say that we're really preparing them for the dog eat dog world that's out there? You know?
Yes. And I love too, I want to just highlight and underline what you were saying, which is you can trust the process and you can still speak up and you can still advocate for yourself.
Mhm.
Because I think so much of what you're saying is just, yeah, resonates very much with the whole master apprentice model. I feel like that's definitely something I've experienced in lessons. And I think the more that we question, the more that we speak up, and again, this maybe goes back to what we were talking about earlier with it's just authenticity and feeling like you can do that. I think that the more that we do speak up, that's how things change, right? This is how we progress and move forward and kind of maybe even let go of some of that master apprentice model. I mean, hopefully. Sorry, I interrupted you. What did you mention did you want to mention your second hot take?
My second hot take. My second hot take is, and I don't know that this is even a fully formed take, okay? But my second hot take is questioning the role of platforms like social media and online streaming services as far as distributing our music. Not necessarily saying that they don't have a place, not necessarily saying that they're wrong, not any of that, because it's a part of our reality. And dismantling it would be that's not where I'm going with this thought at all. But I think it's worth evaluating the impact that platforms like streaming services and social media has had on the perceived value of music, right? Because if you can get music all for free and you can get it all online and it's just, you can comment on people's work without ever addressing them face to face, without ever traveling to see them perform live, without ever being in the same room as them. And then you can just sort of like put your opinions out there and just sort of like, I'm going to tell you what I think. And then people can just react to their videos on, on social media, which I myself have done, right? I wonder what all of this is doing to the perceived value of music as an art form. And I wonder what it does as far as preserving or harming the humanity of the artists behind this work, right?
Yeah.
Because we're human beings and the songs that we put out there they come from our soul, like they come from in us, right? Of course, that like it doesn't go that deep for everybody, but I think for most people, there's some level of connection between who you are and the songs that you put out there. And there's so many dark alleys that you could go into when it comes to talking about this part of the industry. But that's sort of the question that I have at large. I think that the big benefit that they tout is, hey, you can put your music out there and let it be available to the whole world, and your audience can grow and you can get a huge following, which first of all is that's deceiving, right? Because it's not easy to get a big following. It's a full-time job to grow a following online in any platform, right? So not only are you getting drained, pouring yourself into this effort that isn't even what you want to be doing as an artist, you're also being forced to commodify not just your work as an artist, but now also your life. Like you're also being forced to kind of like turn yourself into entertainment, which
Yes.
makes me
Yes.
really like, how helpful really is that? Like, is that helpful for us as a human race? Like, is that helpful for us as a creative race? Like, how is that going to impact us in the long run?
I have those same questions. I have those same thoughts. Like, literally, this has been my beef with social media these last like 2 months. And I feel like I've only recently gotten back into a rhythm of like making content because it really does. I mean, and obviously, we're in a very specific niche, but no matter what niche you're in, if you're an artist or a voice teacher or you're something that, like any sort of content creation where you're trying to build a following, I think that yeah, it's like you're the product and you have to market yourself, and that feels really kind of icky to me. And I think especially for musicians and artists, it's like you said, these are very personal songs. I have a student that I just met with earlier today who's a singer songwriter, and her songs are on Spotify. And we were just talking about that too, with just content creation and how they kind of feel this sort of conflict of, well, I want to promote my music and I want more people to hear it and I want to grow my following, but I'm just having the hardest time coming up with content. And it's like you have to, do reacts, or you have to do get ready with me's. And it's like, it just feels like, to them specifically, it was just feeling really inauthentic and feeling like this isn't what I want to spend my time doing. I want
Mhm.
to be singing, or I want to be teaching. I want to be working on these things, not so much this. And I think, especially with content, we don't own the content either. We don't own anything that we post on these platforms. And I mean, even like maybe even going to Spotify a little bit with these streaming platforms too, we don't own the music. Like, obviously, yes, we can stream it for free if you have a Spotify account or Apple Music account or whatever. But I think also I've got beef with those platforms too, where it's just like they're not paying well enough, or it's just like, or it's also too, it's just this has been why too I've been really trying to buy physical copies of the music that I like, because that part of it too, where it could just go poof, because like I said, we don't own anything on these platforms.
Mhm.
Like, we make the content and maybe it saves it to our phone. We obviously, like, if you're recording music, it's on your computer and things like that, but it's like ultimately we don't own what's on these platforms. And I think it's we're generating income ultimately for these big corporations too, like Meta and all
Exactly.
and whatnot.
Exactly. Yeah.
I don't know. Did you have any other thoughts on that? I know I kind of
I
went off on a
mean,
tangent.
I feel like we're on the same page on a lot of things, and it's not something that I have any answers to because, I am by
Yeah.
no means like an expert in this. I'm not an ethnographer. I'm not like a tech expert. I'm not even like a marketing expert. And I just, as an individual who works with musicians and who sees the industry kind of like growing in this direction, it really just makes me wonder, you know, um, what is it all worth in the end? And you get a few people who really kind of like break through and the algorithm explodes their careers, which is, hey, great for them. But then you also have a lot of people that, the process comes with a huge cost for their mental health, for their creativity, for their family life, their personal life, their real life, like the real world physical life that they're living. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And yeah, that makes me question the value of it. And it also makes me, long for uh, more in-person connection between musicians and audiences, like live acts where you get to be in the room with people because there's so much that you miss from just hearing a recording. Like there's so much to a person that you absorb just by being in their
Yes.
proximity. And that's like half the magic, you know what I mean, of performance. And people are just it seems like if it's not the Eras tour, it's nothing.
True. That is
you
so
know,
true.
nothing against Taylor Swift, obviously, but like, it feels like people's attentions are being funneled to very specific things now. And it's, you know, I don't know, I'm longing for more open mic nights in communities and more like, small live shows where people can have like a dedicated following in their own town, you know what I mean? Or
Yeah.
like stuff like that where there's a real sense of real people supporting a real person because they appreciate the work that they do, but they also appreciate them as human beings. Like, and I'm not saying that that's what it used to be because I don't know if that's what it used to be, but I long for something like that as a musician. Like for me, that would be amazing to really feel that support in real life, not just, and not have to like sell my soul and commit my entire life to feeding this algorithm along
Yes.
with billions of other people. You know what I mean? And just I want to be deeply known as a creative, even if it's just among a smaller crowd.
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I don't know like where we go from here with this kind of thing, but I think even just talking and bringing awareness to it, it's important because otherwise we're just going about our business and just ignoring the big elephant in the room, right? Um, to kind of wrap things up a little bit here, are there any projects that you're currently working on, either as a singer or a teacher, that you'd like to promote?
Sure. I'm actually recording some music, and so that's gonna probably get released when I have them all recorded. I just recorded the first track. So this is the first time I've actually recorded anything of my own in
Wow.
years. So that's exciting. And as a teacher, not, I have a few speaking engagements coming up this year. I'm actually doing a webinar on, uh, you know, uh, connecting with our why as voice teachers. So I'm doing this through the Institute for Vocal Advancement. This is going to be on March 31st. And so that's the next thing that I've got coming up as far as a public event. And so everyone can sign up for this. This is not just for IVA teachers, but this is for all voice teachers who want to
Cool.
who want to take part. So it's going to be a webinar on reconnecting with your sense of purpose as a teacher, talking about why this matters, why this is important. And we're going to go through sort of like a group coaching exercise where everybody kind of, hopefully gets to reestablish some connection with that sense of purpose within themselves. And so Again, that's on March 31st. And then I've got a couple of other conferences coming up later on in the year. I'm teaching a conference in November. I'm teaching at IvaCon in June. So lots of stuff coming up for me for teaching.
Nice, exciting. I'll be sure to put some of that in the show notes. Moving on to rapid fire. Are you ready?
Yes, I am. I think so. Ready as
All
I'll ever
right.
be.
So my first one is coffee or tea?
Tea.
What kind of tea?
Rooibos.
Okay, nice. Okay. What is your favorite way to relax at the end of a long day?
Netflix.
Nice. What are you watching right now on Netflix?
Korean dramas.
Oh, nice. Okay, cool. That's cool. What is a song that's been stuck in your head lately?
Oh gosh, it's one of my own. It's one of my own, which I can't reveal yet because it hasn't been released. But it's
Oh my
one
gosh.
of my own. If not that, it's APT by Rose and Bruno Mars because my daughter loves that song.
I hear that all over TikTok too. That's like a big TikTok song. I love
Except
that.
except for she loves this one version of it that's actually being sung by cats. So instead of the lyrics, it's meow 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 meow. I think the artist is Bongo Cats. So that's what's on
Oh my
repeat right now in the
God.
Maranan household. So everybody's got it stuck in their heads.
That is really funny. What is a book that you recommend everyone read at least once?
Oh my gosh, so many books. Uh, I think for creatives, one book that I love is Real Artists Don't Starve.
Sweet, that sounds good.
um, for non-artists, Essentialism.
Oh, by isn't it like Greg
Mac,
Greg
I can't
McCown?
pronounce his last name. McCown? I'm sorry, sir, if
That's
I'm
okay. That's
mispronouncing
okay.
your book.
I've seen it on, I think it's on my Libby app. I've seen it. So I know what you're talking about, but essentialism, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Um, my last rapid fire is what is the best advice you've ever received, either singing related or not?
Best advice I've ever received, whether singing related or not. You know what? Honestly, it's not really advice, but it's like a mantra that okay, don't laugh at. I picked this up from a Peloton instructor, Cody Rigsby. He
Nice.
he says, it's not that deep, boo.
I like
Honestly,
that.
for somebody who chronically overthinks everything, that's
Yes.
actually been a very helpful mantra for me to practice for me to repeat in my mind. It's not that deep. Just go for it. It's not that deep. It doesn't have to be perfect. You don't have to think so hard. You don't have to think like 100 steps ahead. Just go for it. And
Yes.
it's been so helpful in a lot of different ways. So shout out to Cody Rigsby if you're hearing this. Love your work.
I love that though. That is a really good one, especially like I'm somebody that definitely has some like anticipatory anxiety where I have to plan everything out. And so I love that. That's an excellent one. I'm going to try and keep in mind. Well, Renee, thank you so much for coming on the No Wrong Notes podcast. I've really enjoyed talking with you. This has been a great chat.
Yes, absolutely. Me too. Thanks for having me.
Okay, friends, that is it for this week's episode of No Wrong Notes. If you want to find out more about Renee and her work, you can do so in the show description. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd love it if you could leave a 5-star rating and review. And if you want to work with me this spring, I highly recommend doing so via my Curious Singer membership, which you can also check out in the show description. And if you want more singing content like this, follow me on social media. And in the meantime, happy singing, y'all.